Once upon a time, there was a little girl who lived in a village near the forest. Her mother was very fond of her daughter, and her grandmother doted on her still more. Whenever the little girl went out, she wore a red riding cloak, and so everyone in the village called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day, her mother had made some cakes, and so she said to Little Red Riding Hood, "Go, my dear, and see how your grandmother is doing, for I hear she has been rather ill. Take her a cake and this little pot of butter." "That's a good idea," said Red Riding Hood, and they packed some cake and butter in a basket for Little Red Riding Hood to take to her grandmother. When the basket was ready, the little girl put on her red cloak and kissed her mother goodbye. "Now remember, go straight to Grandma's house," her mother cautioned. "Don't dawdle along the way, and please don't talk to strangers. The woods are a dangerous place." "Don't worry, Mum," said Little Red Riding Hood. "I'll be careful." But when Little Red Riding Hood noticed some lovely flowers in the woods, she forgot her promise to her mother. She stopped to pick a few flowers to take to her grandmother. And she was enjoying the warm summer day so much that she didn't even notice a dark shadow approaching out of the forest behind her. Suddenly, the wolf appeared beside her. The wolf had a great mind to eat her up there and then, but he dared not, because there were some woodcutters working nearby in the forest, and he knew that they would come and stop him, perhaps even kill him. And so instead, he asked her where she was going, in a voice as friendly as he could muster. "I'm going to see my grandmother and carry her a cake and a little pot of butter from my mother," Little Red Riding Hood replied. "Does she live far off?" said the wolf. "She lives on the other side of the forest," answered Little Red Riding Hood, "in the first house, just beyond the mill." The wolf ran as fast as he could, taking the shortest path, and the little girl continued on her path, entertaining herself by gathering nuts, running after butterflies, and gathering little bouquets of flowers. It was not long before the wolf arrived at the old woman's house. He knocked at the door. Tap, tap. "Who's there?" "Your grandchild, Little Red Riding Hood," replied the wolf, imitating Little Red Riding Hood's voice as best he could. "I brought you a cake and a little pot of butter sent to you by my mother." The good grandmother, who was in bed because she was ill, cried out, "Come in, the door's open." The wolf let himself in. Poor Granny did not have time to say another word before the wolf gobbled her up, for it had been more than 3 days since he had eaten. He then poked through Granny's wardrobe to find a nightgown that he liked, and then climbed into her bed, waiting for Red Riding Hood. A few minutes later, she knocked on the door. "Who's there?" said the wolf. Little Red Riding Hood, hearing the deep voice of the wolf, was afraid at first, but then she remembered her grandmother had a cold and was probably a little hoarse. She answered, "It is me, Little Red Riding Hood. I've brought you a cake and a little pot of butter Mother sends you." "Oh, how lovely! Do come in, my dear. The door's open," croaked the wolf. Little Red Riding Hood pulled the door open and walked inside. Seeing her come in, the wolf hid under the bedclothes and said, "Put the cake and the butter on the stool and come sit by my side." "Grandmother, your voice sounds so odd. Is something the matter?" Red Riding Hood asked. "Oh, I just have a touch of a cold," squeaked the wolf, adding a cough at the end to prove his point. "But grandmother, what big ears you have," said Little Red Riding Hood as she edged closer to the bed. "All the better to hear you with, my dear," replied the wolf. "But grandmother, what big eyes you have," said Little Red Riding Hood. "All the better to see you with, my dear," replied the wolf. "But grandmother, what big teeth you have," said Little Red Riding Hood, her voice now quivering slightly. "All the better to eat you with, my dear," roared the wolf, and he leapt out of the bed, fell upon Little Red Riding Hood, and ate her all up.